Okay, Bismillah, Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalam ala Rasulillah. Dear brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, and welcome to another episode of the IlmFeed podcast. This is the podcast where I get to meet really interesting people and share a conversation with you so that hopefully you can be inspired by them and that we can all benefit from them. And my guest today falls squarely into that category. It is none other than Sister Naima B. Robert. Sister Naima is descended from Scottish Highlanders on her father's side and the Zulu people on her mother's side. She was born in Leeds, grew up in Zimbabwe, and went to university in London. At high school, her loves included performing arts, public speaking, and writing stories that shocked her teachers. Her popular From My Sister's Lips explored the reality of living as a Muslim woman in the West. She's also written several multicultural books for children. She was founder and editor of Sisters Magazine, the magazine for fabulous Muslim women. And currently she's running the Muslimah Writer Project, training, mentoring, and publishing the next generation of Muslim writers. Assalamu alaikum, Naima.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
And she also happens to be my friend.
Yes!
Alhamdulillah. Those are the best sorts of
Alhamdulillah,
guests.
yes.
Naima, have you reflected on the fact that the first time we met was in a studio like this?
SubhanAllah, it's crazy. It's so much has happened since then as well. So much so.
So I was a presenter for Ramadan Radio, or Radio Reality in Northwest London. And I had been reading your book, From My Sister's Lips. And every time I turned the page, I was like, oh my God, this sister has said everything we wanted people to know about us, you know? And I just loved the book. And I thought, this sister is somebody who is wise, mashallah, somebody who's really thought about this. But I think the greatest thing that I got from your book was that you were confident and you were owning our stories in a way that I'd never considered doing, you know, and I think a lot of sisters had never really considered doing. And so when I had the opportunity to invite people onto the show, I was like, I want to get this sister. So somehow I reached out and you turned up, and that was the first time we met.
Yeah. And thankfully, alhamdulillah, we've met many times since then and been involved in amazing things together. So it's a privilege and an honor to be here. Jazakallah khairan for inviting me.
Jazakallah khairan. And I think it was there that we actually even began sort of talking about Sisters Magazine. And you invited me, and you know, I consider you to be someone who's really helped me and mentored me and kind of championed me and many other sisters, you know, to give us that confidence that maybe was lacking in not only owning our stories, but also being confident enough to tell them and to develop ourselves as writers. So I really want to thank you for that.
No, alhamdulillah. I think one of the things that, as you probably know, Sisters Magazine resulted from my experiences with From My Sister's Lips, because when the book came out, there was quite a bit of media attention. You know, I was on TV, I was on the radio, I was in the newspaper, and I was invited to come and speak on lots of different stages and lots of different platforms, including like a whole tour of South Africa. And I remember that one of the things that people kept saying again and again was, you know, your story is so inspirational, you know. And I guess when I came back, I thought, you know, how can we continue this conversation? How can we continue to inspire each other and support each other and let us know that we are not alone? How could we continue doing that? So my first idea was a website, and that was back in the day before, you know, websites were a thing, and obviously before Facebook and everything. But my first idea was some kind of social website, like a social online community. And then it kind of moved on from that to become a magazine, and it was an online magazine at first. And the thing that I really want to celebrate about Sisters is that it placed Muslim women squarely in the center of their own narrative. Whereas a lot of the time when we are focused on writing, we are writing for an external gaze. So very often when we write, there is an idea that we're presenting something to the outside. And I always used to say that Sisters Magazine is not a dawah magazine. It is our magazine for what we need it to be. So whether it's celebrating our situations, our life journeys, or examining the challenges that we're going through, or simply just talking about, our own lives as Muslim women, we were at the center of the discussion. It just so happened that people did give the magazine out for dawah because it was a beautiful magazine and it was great. But what I loved about it was, because we didn't write it and we didn't bring people in to discuss things for the benefit of outsiders, we were able to be honest and we were able to be open. And if you remember, Sisters Magazine was one of the first places where we discussed things like depression, things like, low confidence, for example, even dealing with marital issues. We were really frank and open because it was our space. And I'm just grateful because now, obviously, there's so many more spaces like that online. So, we're blessed in that respect. But I think having sisters as the central theme and the central participants of the discussion. We were not being discussed by other people, whether they were scholars or non-Muslims or anybody else. It was our conversation and we were talking to each other. And I think that's what made a lot of it so powerful. And what you said about the confidence comes from owning your space and taking up space and being confident to say, this is who we are. Good, bad, ugly, this is who we are. Love us, don't love us, whatever, but this is who we are, and we are going to continue to be and live according to our values and strive to grow and evolve, etc., based on who we are, not on who you need us to be or who you don't want us to be or who you think we are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, because I think both of us have had experience of being on other people's platforms, right? Being phoned up by the BBC or, whether mainstream or, even other Muslim platforms. And often, if we're not owning that space, it's somebody else's agenda, it's somebody else's pigeonholing.
Exactly,
Right?
They want you to talk about what they want you to talk about and address the issues that they feel are the big issues.
Right.
But sometimes those big issues that people want us to talk about are actually not the things that are affecting us in our daily lives, are not the things that are taking up the majority of our headspace. But when we are called out to speak, like, it's someone else's list. Okay, we want you to address this, this, and this because we think those are the big issues.
Please talk about this. Please talk. And if you try to stray into anything else, it's like, oh, you're not fulfilling the remit, role that we had planned for you. But at the same time, in the broader meaning of da'wah, right, which is not just da'wah to non-Muslims, but da'wah amongst each other, supporting one another to follow the deen, supporting one another to think about things with the right mindset. So I think this Sisters was absolutely doing that.
No, it was. I think my pushback was against a publication that was about presenting Islam to outsiders. Because when we do that, we are necessarily presenting usually a theoretical understanding, and also you're putting your best face forward, right? Because it's a presentation, so you're not allowed to do a warts and all presentation. No one wants that. They want they want the inviting and appealing side, and I think not caring about that and not focusing on that meant that we were able to be much more honest, always within an Islamic environment, within Islamic parameters, but able to really be ourselves. And I think that's a huge luxury that we had. So, alhamdulillah.
So can we go back a little bit? Because even though I've known you for many years, I've never really asked you about your mother or your childhood, or except for what I read in from my sister's lips. But I think there were certain aspects discussed there. But so tell us about your mother.
My mum. Well, my parents were from South Africa, and my dad was white and my mother was black, as you said in the bio. And so obviously they were not allowed to be together under the apartheid laws. So they left the South Africa and actually applied for asylum in the UK. My dad was at Leeds University. That's why I was born in Leeds. And then we spent 2 years there, and then we went to Ethiopia. And we lived in Ethiopia for 4 years, and then we moved to Zimbabwe. So we were kind of following my dad a lot of the time. And my dad is and was a Marxist who really wanted to live in a country that was, as Marxist as possible, which is why we went to Ethiopia. And then at the time, Zimbabwe was also just newly independent. So to be closer to home and closer to family that was still in South Africa, we went down to Zimbabwe. And I'm very, very grateful as an African to have grown up in Africa, because I know that, people in the African diaspora, so a lot of people don't know that I'm mixed race, or they don't know that I consider myself black or African or anything. But when I meet black people, Muslim or not Muslim, who've grown up in the West or in the diaspora, I can see how valuable growing up in Africa was for me in terms of my confidence and being grounded. And so I grew up in Zimbabwe, still an outsider, because we were not Zimbabwean. And anybody who's Zimbabwean knows Zimbabwean culture is based on the extended family. And so if you're not part of someone's extended family, you are necessarily going to be on the outside. But, sometimes being on the outside of things even slightly gives you a different perspective. And for me, I feel privileged to be connected with so many identities, but still have a level of distance so that I'm able to be, I guess, circumspect about them. I'm not so deep in any identity that I can't see, okay, this is going really well, this is an advantage, and this is actually really messed up over here. I don't accept that. So anyway, growing up in Zimbabwe, did the whole school thing, was, head girl of my school. I was like an A student, and
in a private school, right?
It was a government school, but it was one of the best government schools. So it wasn't a private school. My dad was against private schools, so he would never have sent us there. But in school, I was very heavily involved in public speaking, in drama. They gave me a lot of leeway.
How come you don't have an accent?
Because Shona is not my mother tongue. So a lot of people around the world who have an accent is because their mother tongue is not English. But my mother tongue is English. So when I first arrived from Zimbabwe, I had a slight accent, because a bit like Trevor Noah. It was a bit more like Trevor Noah's accent. But when I went to London, because I pick up accents really easily, it's all gone. And so when I'm presenting, normally I try to be very, well-spoken and, present myself very professionally. But if I'm on Instagram Live, I might drop some what you doing, and just sort it out and all of that kind of thing. So, it blends, I guess. But I really feel those years in school laid the groundwork for who I am today.
In what way?
The confidence. Because I did some crazy stuff. I really had this visionary mentality from when I was about 16, 17. Once I wrote a whole musical. This whole play from scratch. It was completely original. I wrote all the songs, I wrote all the dialogue and everything. And I actually got my school to perform it, And, I made the scripts, I did everything. I got my people in to come and film it. We designed the costumes, the whole thing. And, public speaking, I won public competitions again and again and again. We did so... And that's something that I lament for my children and a lot of kids in this generation, that school is not such an enriching experience for many kids nowadays, because especially who are in state schools, they go in, drill, test, exam. And the other stuff, like the school life stuff, if you're in the sports,
the enrichment stuff,
all the enrichment, the cultural and the sporting things, I don't see this generation having them, because their funds have been cut so badly. And also teachers are so stretched now with, all the demands on their time and everything. Anyway, going completely off topic here. But when I was at school, I believed I could do anything. And my school pretty much played along because they gave me a lot of leeway. And I was the head girl, and I set up the centenary committee, and we did a fundraising for this huge celebration of the school's 100 years. People believed in me. And so I think I carried that with me, and it's kind of ebbed and flowed. But when I look at sort of, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, what I've been able to do as a Muslim woman, as a mother, as someone who wears niqab, if my confidence hadn't been laid when I was at school, I don't think I would have done half the things I did. I just wouldn't have had the guts to do it, because it just was not the done thing. When you're, a Muslimah and you've got young children, you don't just decide I'm going to write a memoir. Who does that? And say, okay, to your agent, okay, yeah, go on. I can carry that off. Let's do it. You don't just start sending books out to publishers that you've never heard of, writing about being Muslim and Islam and stuff like that. you don't just leave the country to go and live in Egypt, you know? You don't just start a company, you don't just start a magazine, you know? So I'm very, very grateful for that time, alhamdulillah. And I think you also had quite a foundational experience when you were young, didn't you? To sort of give you that confidence.
I loved school,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
My teachers were just constantly motivating me, constantly. It's amazing because I also wrote a play for the school.
Did you? I didn't know
And
that.
we performed it.
Wow,
It wasn't a
amazing.
musical, I don't think. But, it was a play. I was the narrator as well.
Amazing.
And so we've had a quite similar experience in that regard. And, I wanted to be an astronaut. And my science teacher, I went to him and asked him. And he said, he's looking at this girl with a hijab on, right? I was a teenager at the time. And he said, well, what you should do is join the RAF. You should join the Air Force because most astronauts are pilots.
Yeah.
And I literally phoned the RAF and
Wow.
I joined the RAF cadets, you know. So, but I left very soon afterwards because it was just not my kind of scene, right? But it kind of tells you how important it is for in those early years for the voices in your head to be the voices that say, you can figure it out.
Yeah.
There is a way. You just have to figure out the path.
Yeah.
And just giving those opportunities, which is why I was quite surprised that when I've talked to you in the past about schooling, that you are quite, not very positive about schooling. Because for me, because of my positive schooling experience, I wanted my kids to go to school.
Yeah, the thing is, I wanted my kids to have what I had, but I see kids today don't really have that. Majority of kids, I just see, well, like I said, so many schools have had their funding cut. They've had to let go of playing fields. That vibrant school life, I think, really happens mainly in private schools now. Across the world, not just in the UK, but I see that they hold on to that. Having lots of clubs available, having lots of activities, sports is taken very seriously and all of that. But in our state schools, I don't see that to be the case. So, and I saw that when I was in Egypt as well. So obviously my kids they spent about 10 years in Egypt. And, the Egyptian school system similarly is not based around extracurricular activities or anything like that. It's very much study, work, and, then go to the Nadi after school. So I think that's why I longed for my children to have that experience. But when I saw that in general in school today, the focus has shifted. I started to just re-examine my thoughts about that. And also, I think, even the schools that we went to and the school system that we were in, I think for those who are primed for that, we soared. But then there were others who maybe are not the A players, they are not the alpha males, and they didn't do so well because of the emphasis on whatever. So, I think schooling is a tough one. School and education is a tough one. I think what I've seen over the years is that there's always a trade-off. To have the Islamic side and the manners with the high academics and the cultural and sporting and facilities, it's well nigh impossible. But so you kind of have to make your choices. Every parent has to make their choices.
Do struggle and they muddle through. They have to make a decision and then they make decision based on what works, I think, in their particular circumstances. So like whenever sisters, they often ask or discuss what's the best way to educate your child. For me, there's no one way. Formula.
There's no one fit, is there?
What would you say to sisters when they ask you that? Is homeschooling the way? Because I know many sisters do homeschool, and they enjoy it. They get a lot out of it, and their children get a lot out of it. But there was a time I don't know if you were you'd heard about this, but there was a time when homeschooling was very much being promoted as the only way, right? So unschooling, right? And there was a sort of a guilt trip narrative, right? Yeah. Basically, schooling is like the lazy parents thing, And I think sometimes some of the people who were proponents of that, and sometimes they were scholars, right? Famous scholars, especially from America, and I think sometimes they might not have realized that not everyone has a lovely California ranch, right? to bring
Which
their
of course
kids
is
up
the
in, right?
ideal scenario for homeschooling. But anyway,
and most people, or
Yeah.
many people out there who are listening to that, sort
Yeah.
of feeling that homeschooling is the only way, they're literally in a council flat, right?
Yeah.
With very restricted resources, very restricted time,
Yeah.
struggling with their marriage. You know, I mean, there's so many things going on
Yeah.
that actually it would probably be better for their kids
Yeah, I
if they
agree.
did have an
Some
external
stability,
space,
some
right?
stability somewhere. Mm.
Right. So I think that kind of narrative of like giving parents guilt trips, you know, about any choice that they make, I think is kind of unhealthy.
To be honest, I agree with you, but I also think that like no, I can't see anybody having the monopoly on success at the
Right.
moment right now.
Yeah.
Because there are homeschoolers who have done amazingly well. There are
Right.
homeschoolers who have failed miserably. Same with Islamic schools. There's some kids who've been through Islamic school and they've been amazingly successful, and others who've been scarred by the Islamic school system. Similarly with state schools, similarly with private schools. So I don't think anyone right now can say our way was the best.
Yeah.
Yes, we are the
I agree.
winners. And another thing as well is I feel that in those early days, the push for homeschooling came from a place of fear and anxiety about the greater society, about the wider society and the influences of the wider society. I don't know whether we're talking about the same thing here, but I remember that when people had homeschooling as an option back in the day, it was to protect your children.
Yeah.
It was to keep them safe, away from the influences of whatever, and be able to nurture them in a bubble almost. And that has its drawbacks, because I feel that if you're going to homeschool, you must take extreme responsibility for preparing your child for the future. Which means that they must have an understanding of the outside world. So for me, this is my personal view, and somebody else can say, you know, that doesn't work for me. And again, everyone is preparing their children for different things. So some of our children will be the scholars of the future. Some of our children will be the academics of the future. Some will be the online marketing gurus of the future. Some will be the homemakers of the future. The photographers, the designers, the bricklayers, the architects, the accountants, the lawyers, and all of them will need their own specialized pathway towards that end goal, right?
Yep.
So somebody maybe who didn't do as much in terms of history or humanities is on a track to become an accountant anyway, so fair enough. But I feel like the breadth of education that a lot of homeschoolers kind of should have been going for, they were not going for, because the focus was so narrow. The focus is make sure they've got maths and English, because they have to have maths and English, and then Quran, maybe Arabic, lots of Islamic studies, and that's it. If you've done that, then you're good. And that's not, I just don't agree with that. Because I think that the children deserve to be opened up to experiences, you know, that we have access to. And remember as well that, like you're saying about being in a council flat, there are levels of access in this society, which many of us, if we've come from immigrant backgrounds or we live in the inner city, a lot of us don't have access to the culture, or don't feel comfortable in those spaces. And it's something that's widely reported that children from, you know, immigrant families, or it's, you know, like BAME families don't access museums, don't access national parks, don't access the stuff that's out there that could really enrich our experience. You know, we know people who go walking. Do your relatives go walking on the Sunday afternoon? No, they don't.
Yes, they do.
Do they? Really?
My siblings do, yeah.
No, your siblings are, but
members
they're
of the
English.
They're members of the National Trust. and
They're English.
they've got,
They're completely English
They're
fine.
always calling me over to go come to some park or stately home or...
But that is
that's a very English
access.
thing,
That is cultural capital that they have, and it's a very English thing.
But we learned that from school.
This is
We
so
got a lot of it from school.
right. Okay.
Because I don't think my parents would have
No.
naturally, as immigrants, wouldn't have naturally thought of... Though my dad did get us annual pass for the British and Natural History Museum, so he was that sort of person.
It was going on that way, mashallah.
Yeah, but yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, by the way, I just want to make clear, I'm not saying that if you live in a council flat you can't homeschool, right? I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that I've actually met people who I wish would not homeschool, you know, because sometimes the people are actually quite neurotic about their kids, and that's what's leading them.
But this is what I was saying, is they're coming from a place
homeschool.
of fear and anxiety, and that's never going to be good, because anytime your action is spurred by fear and anxiety or scarcity or lack, you're not going to get good results from that, because again, you're like trying to get away from something, but you don't really have a vision for where you want to go. All you know is you don't want that. You don't want that, whatever that scary thing is. But then now you're like, okay, what do I do now? You know, what do I do? Buy some worksheets and some, so those workbooks, make them sit down there, and then they get bored and they get fractious, and then you go give them the iPad. It's not a small undertaking. And so when you want to take it on, I think you really need to have a vision for your family and for your children. And I think a lot of parents do, but I think maybe every parent needs to have that vision of where they're going. Rather than what they're trying to escape from or trying to keep them safe from. Where is it that you're going? What is it that you're building for your children? Absolutely. What is it you're giving them for their future? Because at the end of the day, our job as parents is to equip our children with the tools they will need to stand on their own 2 feet, to be responsible, dedicated slaves of Allah and citizens of the world, right?
Absolutely.
So as long as you have that as your goal, then your question is, how can I best prepare them for that? Whether you're using school, whether it's homeschool, whether it's online school, whether it's private, Islamic, tutors, whatever the case may be. I, as a parent, just want to know I have done my utmost to prepare these children to stand on their own 2 feet. Because where I live, up north, there is a huge thing about girls' education. Okay, and it still is an issue. So girls will be in school because they have to be, but
you mean Muslim?
Muslim girls will be in school because obviously they have to be legally, but it's not expected that they'll continue after 16. And I remember, and so there's always like that tension, because the Muslim schools want to encourage the girls to do well and to push themselves to excel in their GCSEs, and some of the girls might want to do that on the one hand. But on the other hand, they know that there's no point, because their parents are not going to let them do A-levels anyway. They're going to go into an Alimah course or get married. You know what I mean? So there's this tension for the school, because the school is trying to support the parents, which is why the parents put them in the school in the first place. But then they're also trying to support the child and what the child is capable of and the potential of the child. So there's that. And another thing that just occurred to me was, in Zimbabwe and in South Africa, there are Muslim communities where the girls go to school and finish at primary school. And then they stay home and they homeschool. But that homeschooling literally is like maybe a little bit of reading and writing, bit of maths, no exams after that stage. And the whole idea is to keep her safe from society, to keep her safe from corruption, so that when she gets married, she will be pure and she'll be a good Muslim wife. And that kind of thing is very scary for me, because take you as a parent out of the equation, that child is not equipped. And not only that young woman, for her to then raise the next generation, how well equipped is she to even raise children, that are well prepared? I don't know. What do you think about that?
I sometimes feel a bit uncomfortable, like looking at other countries and cultures and sort of thinking, well, why don't they care about the things that we care about? Sometimes I think maybe they've got a reality that they're actually preparing their children for, that we in the luxurious, decadent West, are not appreciative of, right? So maybe they're preparing them for the reality that they need to be prepared for.
That could be the case, but in this case, no. Because these are people who live in suburban Johannesburg, suburban Harare, which is just as, kind of, what are the words you use, decadent?
Yeah.
just as cosmopolitan, as the UK. It's really more about parents setting a path for their children and restricting them to that path, because that's what they want for them and that's what's acceptable as far as they are concerned. And I just feel, if you've not educated your daughter beyond standard 7 or whatever, I feel you've done her a disservice, because one day she will have to have her own family, and she may not have you there to help her to navigate, because her kids will probably go into school as well and will be growing up in a wider society. But anyway.
But also, where does the fear come from? I think, it's important to find out, like, why are they so fearful? Because I remember I went to because initially I was homeschooling, right? And then I just felt that for my children, that schooling would be better. I made that decision, and they got entrance into a Muslim school, which was really hard to get into. And I needed that community. I loved having that community, and being able to meet those. And also I loved them having contact with other people, other teachers, who weren't going to have a bad day, hopefully, like their mum would probably, and stuff like that, right? So I feel like their lives have been enriched by having different mentors in their lives. And so that worked for me. But I remember initially when, we were doing homeschooling, I went to this course about homeschooling, and the lady who was presenting, she made a really good point. She said, homeschooling isn't about protecting your children from the world. It's about you introducing your children to the world. Yeah. And I thought, wow, just even that shift.
I love that.
Even that shift in thinking is like, yes, there's the big bad world out there, okay, but you're going to go into that world. And I think, the whole topic of the devouring mother, I don't know if you've heard of this, like, it's probably a Freudian thing, right?
It sounds very Freudian.
Right. Like sort of the Oedipus complex, do they call it? Yeah. But anyway, the devouring mother idea is that, especially boys, right? The mother can tend to over mollycoddle her sons, right? And not allow them to become people who can stand on their own 2 feet, because she kind of fears that they'll leave her, right? So there's almost like a payoff that I'm going to keep you close. I'm not going to make you capable of doing anything.
Sounds like a Desi mother-in-law, to be honest.
So that you can constantly be dependent on me.
Right, yeah.
And you will never leave me.
And I think that, just to jump in on that, because this is something that's been coming up a lot, where we're finding that sort of young men, even the amount of power that a mother wields over the choice of her daughter-in-law. I saw a poster that was a matchmaking event for female relatives. And I'm sorry, but I find that so strange.
So that again, a matchmaking
event for female relatives. So the female relatives of the boy and the girl come to an event where they're matching, okay? And I'm sorry, but I find that so bizarre, because...
So Yani,
mothers looking for daughters-in-laws.
Looking
for daughters and daughters-in-laws and sisters-in-laws, right? And why I say that is because...
maybe the son sent them.
He may have, but that's him reneging on his responsibility. Because why I say that is that as a mother, I may want a particular type of girl for me, as mother of this boy, as the mother-in-law, as the matriarch. I want a particular type of girl. She's going to fit in well with my family. She's going to do what I want her to do. She's the kind of girl that I can get along with, right? But she's not the one marrying the girl. It's him who's marrying the girl. That's true. The relationship will be between them. So for me, the idea of going out and actually filtering the options for my son based on my needs and what I want, I find it very bizarre.
Really? Because
and also just think this point, because I'm wondering how much of my son's true personality I know, enough to be able to say, oh no, he would like her. No, I think they would really get along. Do you know what I mean? Because especially nowadays, a lot of the time, boys have got a completely different life outside of home. Their identity out there on the street, at work, etc., can be so different to who they are at home. So me as a mother, if I'm not very close with my son, like he's really honest with me, very open with me, okay, because out of respect, he just shows me what I want to see. He shows me the side of him that he knows I approve of, right? I'm going to go and look for a wife for him based on what I know of him. But how much do I really know about him? I don't know. I just find it very strange. And so as a mother-in-law, I can say, we want somebody who's fair and educated and from this village.
Right.
But my question is always, did he tell you to look for that?
Yeah.
Are those his criteria? Is that what he wants in a wife? She must be fair, Mum.
That's true.
She needs to be educated, Mum, and she needs to come from our village, okay? Don't bring me anyone else except for someone who fulfills that. Or does he have a completely different set of criteria that she's not aware of? Like he doesn't like funny women, for example.
Yeah.
I don't like women who are too jokey. Or I need someone with a sense of humor. If she doesn't have a sense of humor, I'm not going to be able to get along with her. You know what I mean? Those more subtle things that a picture and a CV, they don't do justice. So if you've got mums kind of like looking and, comparing, oh, this one, who's prettier, who's that? I just think it's bizarre.
And I think appreciate when it goes to an extreme. And I know that a lot of brothers suffer, and they're sort of, and sisters, forced to marry somebody who they really wouldn't have chosen. But at the same time, I like to present maybe a more nuanced or middle view.
Please
that,
do.
Right? And that is that probably it's a cultural thing, yeah?
It is a cultural thing,
It is a cultural thing. And so I'll give you an example. My mother-in-law, when my husband was looking to get married, he's about 25. So she said to him, please, can you marry somebody who speaks Urdu?
Yeah.
Right? And I just remember that she really wanted, but it was kind of like a joint thing.
Yeah,
right? They wanted somebody who was kind of more traditional, right? From a more traditional kind of background, right?
Yeah.
And so now somebody could say, well, I'm not interested in Urdu, right? It doesn't matter to me, right? But I really think that the fact that she did express something, right? Because she cares about her son.
Yes.
She cares about, and also when we're marrying, we are, especially in the Asian communities, we are, two families are coming together.
Yeah.
There is a lot of intermingling and it kind of living together or living very closely, right? So I think by her expressing that, it was kind of courageous and brave of her to do so.
I agree.
Because what then happened was we got on like a house on fire,
Yes,
right?
yeah.
And I could speak to her,
Yeah.
and we could speak on a deep level.
Yes.
We could, and I loved her so much.
Yes.
She passed away
Allah yarhamha.
a few years ago, but I loved her so much. Like, she treated me like a daughter, but I think we underestimate sometimes the importance of language. Same with other people I know. I don't think they have the same relationship with their sons or daughters-in-law that can't speak their language. So that's just one example. But what I mean is that there is a balance as well. Like, I can imagine my son saying to me, Amma, I want you to be involved.
Yeah.
Right? Because that is the culture.
Yes.
So...
But this is the thing, is how involved. Because if I say, please marry someone who speaks Urdu, that's my right to say that. But let's just be clear, that's for me. It's not for you, my son. It's what I want, okay? And what I'm saying is...
it could be for both of you as well.
But then he would have had that. Then he would have already stipulated that, if that was something that was important to him.
Sometimes young people don't think very far ahead, right? Like, they get excited about the way someone looks, right?
Yeah.
I'm just saying that parental input does have a place, and I think it's quite clever of young people if they can keep their parents involved.
I agree.
But where they draw the line. So for my husband, for example, he was religious, and his parents were not from that much of a religious background initially, but they became more religious. So for him, it was like, she must be like this.
Yes.
Right? Which was different to what they
were expecting or
been relaxed about.
Open to,
Right. So there was like, almost like a negotiation going on there. Right? A family negotiation. And I think that's healthy, because I've seen mothers who don't say anything.
Yeah.
And then later, they sort of like, don't get on, And that's because they, didn't really express some of their needs. There's nothing wrong with expressing something that's going to bring harmony to the home. Now, when it gets to the extreme, right, where you're literally, shutting things down, you're not allowing your son to have his own autonomy, and it's not a negotiation, but it's a dictatorial relationship.
Yeah.
Then I
These
can
are
imagine.
my demands. But I guess what I'm querying is, and maybe this is, again, I'm not from the culture.
Yeah.
And certainly we have a very different approach in Africa. Even in African traditional culture, it's nowhere near on the level of Asian cultures in terms of family involvement and also family entitlement to make decisions on behalf of their children. In Africa, we have respect, but parents don't have that kind of blanket, this is what you're doing, so we don't have that background. So I want to just acknowledge that right now, so that I am speaking as an outsider. But my query, I guess, is more about the relationship between the man and the woman.
Right.
And how much
the mother, you mean? Or the
man and his wife.
The
actual husband and wife.
Right.
Because getting along with your mother-in-law is great, but how much of that actually feeds into the relationship? And I know that not getting along with your mother-in-law can cause problems, right? I get that. But I think the issues of compatibility, true understanding and respect between the spouses, I think that has to be the foundation. It can't be she fits into our family, because that's, I think I've seen, and we have seen a lot of marriages where the two people in the marriage are simply not compatible. They tick the boxes, like she's from the right type of family, he's from the right type of family, they seem both educated, it's all good, but as personalities and in terms of their visions for the future, etc., they're just not compatible. And so you either have a situation where you've got a lot of divorces or a lot of loveless marriages. And, you know, I think that we as a community should be open to discussing some of these things in order to set our young people, especially the next generation, to set them up for success in their marriages. Because I think what we are going to see is way more divorces, because already within our generation, divorce is so much more common than it was in our parents' generation. And we're witnessing the fallout of that. And I think if we don't take action for the next generation now in terms of really preparing the men and the women, young men and women, for what marriage truly entails, but also for their relationship with themselves, you know, their own emotional well-being, their mental health, you know, like how they show up as individuals. I think if we don't work on that from a younger age and provide things across the board, like premarital counseling, like premarital training, like, you know, people who are available for you to talk if you really need like an outsider to come in. I think we need to be setting those up now. Otherwise, the next generation, who are even more confused, to be fair, than we are or were, I think they're going to have a really hard time of it. Wallahu alam.
May Allah make it easy for them.
Ameen.
And may Allah help us to make the balanced choices,
Yes,
you know, the
yes.
balanced decisions. Because, to be honest, I can't really understand that desire of a mother for her son to be completely dependent on her. Like, I'm waiting for them to leave. Okay,
I hear that.
Boys, go to uni. Go somewhere a little bit far away. I think I'll regret saying that, actually, because
You will miss them so much.
Yeah, but I actually love the idea of my sons standing on their my sons make tea for me, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I came home after an IlmFeed episode, knackered, and my mum was there because she was helping look after the kids, and I said, "Yusuf, make me a cup of tea," and she said, "Oh, poor boys."
Oh, Mum!
She said, "Poor boys."
Really?
Yeah. Bichare bachche.
Just sit down, Mummy. It's okay. You'll make you a cup of tea too.
Because she's the sort of mum who, when, you know, she would never have asked us. I don't know why. She's
Even
just
all you kids, not just the boys, all of you.
Yeah.
She would never have asked
No.
any of you. Interesting.
She
That's
made
so
tea
interesting.
for us.
Right. So this is, I
There's
think,
a
I have a
different-
theory about this. And I think that in previous generations, mothers invested their whole sense of identity and self-worth in being able to mother 100%. And any decrease in that mothering meant a decrease in their worth. You know, if my children no longer need me, then like, what am I doing here, basically, you know? And I think that on the one hand, it makes sense, because if you've grown up believing that my main role in life is to be a mother and to look after my children, look after my home, and cook 10 million dishes and you know, make sure everyone's taken care of and no one has to lift a finger, any decrease in that actually impacts on you, because now you start to feel useless. Like, well, there's nothing for me to do. Therefore, like, you know, what's the point of me being around here? So it kind of ends up being almost a power play, because, you know, and I think it's subconscious. I think you nurture the dependence because you need the dependence to feel validated and to feel valued. And so any independence becomes threatening now, because it's like, what do you mean you can do that without me? No, I'm supposed to do that for you because I love you and I want to do this for you. Don't like deprive me of the opportunity to serve you or to look after you or to care for you in that way. It's a love languages thing.
It's a love language.
It's a love language.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Like, for my mum, that's her love language.
Exactly.
You know? Like, service is her love language. And
Yeah.
she was an orphan. She grew up being
SubhanAllah.
quite a service-minded person,
Wow.
right? All her life.
Yeah.
So I think it's not just about the cultural... I mean, I think a lot of mothers of that generation, they got a lot from that. You know, they felt fulfillment.
It was
from
fulfilling.
That
It's fulfilling.
because
It makes you feel good as a woman.
It was meaningful, and it was.
Yeah.
But I actually think for my mum, she just feels sorry for her grandkids. You know, because I've noticed that parents feel sorrier for their grandkids. Like if they've got a much more sort of softness
softer
for them
attitude to the
than
grandchildren.
they did with you necessarily, right? So
it's like they can't see that the discipline they gave you made you turn out the way you did, because they don't want to do the same discipline with the grandchildren. They don't want them to go through that.
When I was Yusuf's age, I was in Egypt, knocking around, cooking my own food, right? You know, but Yusuf was like, you know, to her, he's still a baby, so I think it's more about the grandchild thing, but that whole idea of like, you know, allowing children to actually be part of the family, to do the chores, to be involved, and those are life skills, you know. They're literally going to need them.
And it causes it just, I think, you know, the more capable, I'm not going to say independent, I'll just use the word capable, the more capable our children are across the board, right, the more desirable they'll be as life partners. Right. Because I really see that with this next generation of girls, even the rhetoric even amongst us and our generation, but definitely the next generation, is I don't want to marry a child. I don't want to marry somebody who I have to carry along, who I have to develop, or I have to nurture, or I have to make him into the man that he's going to be. I want to marry a partner. And I think Michelle Obama mentioned this. She did. She talked about marrying somebody who will be a strong teammate. Yeah. That if you both have like strengths that are complementary, as a team, you're going to go way further, rather than you're the strong one and you marry like a weak teammate, and now you're overcompensating for the weakness of the other partner, you know? And of course, we're talking about complementary strengths here. So I'm not saying the woman, this man, that, or anything, but just complementary. And I think the more capable our children are, definitely, and more resilient,
especially our sons, if we want them to be the head of the house, if we want them to be leaders, they
have to be able to step up, because otherwise you have a situation where he feels entitled to the name of Amir, but actually cannot back it up with action, with forethought, with confidence, with certainty. He doesn't have any of that, but yet he feels the entitlement because he's been told you are going to be the head of your household. So you want to have both. I would like that for my sons, where they've got the confidence and certainty to say, inshallah, I can handle this. I can take on this responsibility. I am going to do everything I can to make sure I take care of my responsibilities, because that is why I'm head of the household, to take care of my responsibilities, rather than they've got no idea about taking care of responsibilities. They don't believe they really can do it. They've got a lot of lack of confidence, self-esteem issues, etc. But they still are given the stamp of head of the household. It's a bit of a cognitive dissonance, really. And I think we see it. I keep seeing it again and again, where you've got these marriages where the man will expect to be head of the household, so he's kind of honored in that way. Gets the big piece of chicken, that's what we call it. You know, he got, you know, oh, let dad go first, or you know, these types of things. Oh, your dad's sleeping, all of that kind of thing. The respect, the respect, right? But on the other hand, he's not actually leading the family. The wife is the one constantly thinking about what's the next step, what's the next move. How can we improve? What about this child?
Could be because women tend to be higher in, you know, neuroticism, like from a psycho. Yeah,
Why is that neurotic though?
No, not in neurotic. No, neuroticism isn't not a negative trait necessarily. Right. It means where you overanalyze and you analyze things a lot. And if you look at like, because I've been listening and reading quite a lot of like these psychologists, and they say that there's 5 big traits, right? And one of them is neuroticism.
Yes, I know. I've done personality
tend
tests
to be
on those.
Higher in that.
I'm very low in the neuroticism, by the way. Right. When I did the test, I was super low in neuroticism.
Really, yeah.
So
I think I am as well. So, so what I mean is like, okay, so I get that. And that's why it's really important when, at the time of choosing a spouse, that, you know, we do have the sort of longer term things in mind, right? Because it's all very well being attracted to somebody.
Oh, forget that.
But
seriously, like,
you've forgotten what it's like.
Say this right now.
You've forgotten what it's like to be 19.
But I guess I have. But my point is, and I don't know how many young people listen to this, okay? But what everybody needs to understand is that our tastes are shaped by our environment. Okay, everything's not biological and interior, as a lot of it being shaped by your environment. And if the young people who are listening to this, or people who have young people, young, kids who are growing up, they are growing up in an age of Instagram, of, it's called highlighting and, shaping and, fake eyelashes, fake nails, huge Botox lips, certain types of body images, certain body shapes, hair extensions. This is the world they're growing up in. So to kind of, I'm sorry, but, and I don't mean to sound bad, but really park the attraction thing at the door when you're looking to get married. Because the rest of the world is basing their attraction and the level of attraction with people on hooking up. Because that's the culture that we live in. We live in a hooking up culture.
It's for a short-term gratification.
Exactly. And if the person looks good, you will get your short-term gratification. So well done to you. However, we as Muslims have a very different intent when we're going into marriage. And so you really need to try to detach yourself from, whether it's images from Instagram or images from like TV or even porn and things like that. You really need to cleanse yourself of that so you can see true beauty, because that's what's going to last. You may think to yourself as a young Muslim guy, no, I want a hot wife, I want a hot hijabi wife and all of this kind of thing. But that is surface. And not only is it surface, but it's actually fake. Because most of us girls, we know, you take off all the highlighters and the shading and all of that kind of thing, you look completely different. So really, kind of having that conversation with, our boys and our girls to say, the attraction is nice, but just understand that physical attraction is not a reason to marry somebody and commit your whole life to them, because it's just not going to last, is it? It's okay if you're just going to have like, a fling or whatever. But for us as Muslims to really commit to somebody, we need to be willing to look so much deeper.
And I think that's where parents come in.
I agree.
As well, because sometimes, as a young person, you're not thinking that far ahead. And I think like if I had a proposal and stuff, I would be like, what do you think, Mum and Dad? Just to kind
definitely.
of get their input. And my parents were clever enough not to be overbearing.
Yeah.
But to put those little pointers in, like, bear in mind this, bear in mind that, right? And also to do the due diligence of researching who the person was, getting the references. My dad wasn't going to, not be involved in that.
Yeah, regard, you have to, definitely.
So I do think that sometimes in that regard, just like it takes a village to raise a child.
I agree.
I think it takes a family to kind of make a marriage.
I agree with you. And I think if the family is enlightened in that they understand that it is a relationship between, first of all, two people who are going to start their own household eventually, right? And we come from that standpoint that it's these two first. So let's make sure they're compatible. And then let's make sure we've ticked other boxes that make this couple fit in with the wider picture. Because for sure, like you said, if the family can be more embracing and more open to, well, firstly, I think families need to be a lot less superficial themselves. And really, they also need to detach themselves from certain markers that we've had for a very long time that really do not bear don't have any bearing on the actual success of the marriage. Because just because somebody is from your village, that doesn't mean she's going to get on with your son. Doesn't mean she's a nice person. Doesn't mean he's a good guy. It doesn't mean that they will like each other. It means almost nothing. And I guess the problem will, or the issue will cease to be an issue really, because, so many of our generation are not even connected with the village back home. But I think what I'm saying is, there's certain levels, I guess, that we want to look at. One of them being the compatibility of the spouses, and then the compatibility with the wider family. And, and then you have a situation where everyone's on board. And when everyone's on board, the couple like each other, their families are on board, now you're set up for success. Because if you guys have any problems, the family's there to support you. Yeah. They want you to work. They're rooting for you as a team. And they will be there to support you and help you through, any navigation that you need to do. And also when the children come along, inshallah, they're still, available to you to get advice and to get solace and to get childcare, hopefully. And, but really be there as a support network. And I think those marriages have probably got the best chance of succeeding. But the family has to be on their best behavior as well. And that means not being superficial, not being judgmental, not being closed-minded, and not being selfish.
Absolutely. And that takes maturity
Yeah.
and foresight on
Yeah.
their, yani, for them as well.
Yeah.
Okay, so Jazakallah khairan for that, Naima. And let's go back to your mum.
Back to my mum.
And your dad, because it's intriguing to me that I understand that you seem to identify more with the African side, right? Well, your dad was African too, right? But white.
He's white African, yeah.
So did he have a South African accent? Was he?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm just trying to picture them.
He grew up in South Africa.
Right.
He's obviously his ancestors are Scottish, but he grew up in South Africa. But my dad is an Africanist, so it made sense. He pretty much integrated himself into my mother's culture. So they had a traditional marriage. He spoke her language. They spoke Zulu together, then spoke Xhosa, and he integrated into African culture. So I guess that's partly why I don't
proper
really
lefty.
Yeah,
it's
the best kind.
Mashallah.
But yeah,
so
mashallah. May Allah guide him. I mean,
and tell us about him. You've still got a relationship with him, mashallah.
Yeah, my dad is he's just one of my heroes, I guess. I am a 100% daddy's girl. He's an intellectual, an academic, a theatre person. He's an author, university professor, a Marxist, and he just had a profound effect on me as a child. I mean, we were always close. And I just always wanted his approval. And he was one of those fathers who was quite hard to please. So I remember once I came home with 98% in my test and he said, what happened to the other 2%?
Oh, no. Really?
Yeah, he did. So he had, really quite high expectations of us. But on the other hand, he's very anti-establishmentarian. So he did not approve of me coming to the UK for university. He wanted me to stay in Africa, stay in Zimbabwe, and really contribute to the cultural life of Zimbabwe there, and not leave to go to ruddy England, but mashallah, even though it was difficult for him to accept me becoming Muslim initially, he's now one of my biggest fans. He's always defending Islam to other people, and he is a huge proponent of niqab and polygamy. So there you go.
Really?
Yes.
MashaAllah.
Yes, he is.
We need to invite him on.
Yes, you will have to when he comes. But he said he swore he will never come to England again. So that might be problematic.
Is that the whole Scottish thing?
It is the Scottish thing, and also England as a colonial power and as an imperialist engine. No, he's just anti-England completely. Yeah. So might not be able to get him into the podcast.
We'll have to do a satellite link-up thing.
Something like that.
And so you lost your mum, how old were you?
No, my son, Obaid, was about 1. So that would be 2003, 2004. So yeah, it was a fair while ago. And I think for me, the biggest, I realise now, sort of one of the biggest sadnesses for me really, is that my mum never got to see From My Sister's Lips come out. And so she missed all of that. She missed From My Sister's Lips, she missed, Sisters Magazine, she missed, I guess, who I ended up, who I became in the end, because she felt sad for me. And my dad did too, felt sad for me when I became Muslim, because she thought that I had so much potential, and she just thought I was an amazing girl. And she felt that when I became Muslim, I started wearing a niqab, jilbab, socks and sandals, and all of that. And I think she just felt like that's it for her. She got married, she got pregnant, she had a baby. Now she's in this Muslim thing, and that's it. So I guess, qadar Allah, but that's one of the sadnesses for me, that she never did get to see me shine, I guess. But alhamdulillah, ala kulli hal. Life's like that sometimes.
Alhamdulillah, your father has been there for that.
Alhamdulillah,
so.
yeah.
Yeah, subhanAllah.
My father came with me. He was my mahram on my South Africa tour. He ended up giving a talk in the masjid.
Really?
To these high school boys. I was talking to the girls about me becoming Muslim.
Oh, wow.
So I was talking to the girls, and then they said, this is Naima B. Roberts' dad. He's going to say some words to you. So boys, give him salam. And then he stood up and, he had to just talk about me becoming Muslim. I don't know what he said, but it was so funny. It was so funny because, at the time he was completely agnostic, but he managed to toe the line and, say something that was, relevant and appropriate. So I was very proud of him. May Allah guide him. I mean,
I heard Malcolm Gladwell, the author, he also talking about this topic of like growing up in a place where you are the majority, right? And how, because I think his mother is Jamaican.
Oh,
right?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, his mother was Jamaican. His dad was English.
Oh, I didn't know.
And so he was being asked about he had a very positive childhood, and his mother. He was talking about his mother and how she was just really confident and never really saw race as or the color of her skin as an issue, And he made the comment that now that he's lived in America and he's seen the African American experience, he thinks there is a big difference between the people who grew up in lands where they were the majority, so Africans who immigrate to America, and even Jamaicans, right? And people who are the minority. And he felt that, it has an impact on your psychology. So
I think it impacts on everybody's psychology. You imagine Romani, think of Romani children who, well, Romanis are typically minorities everywhere, so that's probably not a very good example. But, any minority in the West, you compare the young people who grow up in that country versus the young people from back home. Completely different. Because there's a sense of belonging and normality.
Normality, yeah.
You are just normal. You're just the norm, and whether you're black or you're brown or whatever it is, you're the norm, and it's not even an issue. It's not even something you pay attention to per se. Back home, we have other things that we pay attention to, right? Like which tribe you're from, or, which village you came from originally, or whatever, which religion. But as for racial identity, it's not even a question mark.
Don't think about it.
It's just something that's normal, and it's just not even, literally you hardly pay attention to it. And that gives you a sense of just calm and rootedness that growing up in the West as a sometimes despised minority, that's going to completely change your outlook. So if you imagine, young Pakistani and Indian children, Caribbean kids, African kids who grew up in the UK in the 70s and 80s, for example, when racism was very open, when there were no black role models or Asian role models, when there were no books with black and Asian characters, when the only time you ever heard about black and Asian people was in a criminal context, a bit similar to how Muslims are today, you can imagine the effect that would have had on their psyche, the shame.
But I think
the humiliation,
the prouder your parents were, and more as secure as they were in their own skin and background, I think that passes on to the kids. Because I was just thinking, I know it sounds a bit funny, but the whole Bollywood culture, right? And Indian clothes, I think having had that, growing up, just there in the background, even if we weren't fully in it. But just the fact that Indians, especially, they do feel proud of their culture. They do think their clothes are better. They do think that
their food is better.
Their food is better. Yeah, we do have that psychology, right? And our parents obviously grew up as them, not as minorities, right? I do think that passes on as well. Do you
think there's a difference between how Indians and Pakistanis experience the immigrant experience in the UK? Do you think there is?
Compared to other immigrants?
No, Indians and Pakistanis, the two of them.
Oh, I'm not sure, to be honest, because I've been with, growing up, I've been with Indians and Pakistanis, and I never really noticed much of a difference. Okay. But maybe, they might say otherwise. I mean, all our family friends were Pakistanis and Urdu speaking mainly.
Yeah. I think probably the parents having that pride and almost a cultural chauvinism, really, we are better, gore this and gore that, and, and I get that. But I think I
don't know about that.
Well, but you know what I mean? It is
But it's like the whole thing of when you were called a Paki for the first time, right? And you'd come home and, Dad, somebody called me a Paki, right? And Dad was like, well, that's a good thing.
Okay.
I was like, is it? He said, Pak ka matlab, Pak means clean, right? That's Pakistan.
Dad is doing a bit of remix there.
is the clean land of the clean. That's what it means, right?
Okay.
The land of purity.
Right.
Yeah? So he sort of flipped it around and was like, yeah.
Your dad was clever.
It's
Mashallah.
true. So
Yeah, your dad
do you
was
see,
clever.
like, you'd sort of think, yeah, see, they think they're insulting us, but they're
Yes.
actually calling us pure, you know?
Wow, look at that. I didn't
So-
even know that.
Yeah, so
Wow.
stuff like that, you
Yeah.
know? Yeah, there was stuff like that, because there was a lot of racism
Yeah.
in the 80s and...
70s,
but,
I
yeah.
think, was even worse.
I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah, but alhamdulillah, you know, just to kind of divert the conversation a little bit, I think there will be challenges with every generation. And there always have been challenges. You know that, I think it's from Dickens, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, it's always the best of times and the worst of times, if you think about it, depending on your perspective, depending on who you are within that context. And I think, you know, I'm grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for all the good things that we've experienced in our lives as Muslims in the UK, while cognizant of the fact that we've had our fair share of challenges. But again, every challenge is an opportunity to rise. And I want to just reiterate that every challenge is an opportunity to grow and to rise and to evolve, really. And I think that we have been doing that. And, you know, whether it's a personal challenge or it's a societal challenge, Allah knows that He has already told us He will not burden us more than we can bear. And so every time that there is, you know, whatever the challenge is, I think it's always good to remember that Allah will never let us go under with that. As long as we believe that we can rise to this challenge and that we have the capacity to bear whatever it is and to get the good at the end of it, you know, to come out of that trial or that test better. I think that that's really important to look at, because sometimes we can get into the habit of kind of like sitting down and just naming all the difficulties and, you know, like so many things are going wrong, you know, this ummah is this and da-da-da-da, you know, like everything's falling apart, right? But I think that probably people throughout history have been able to have that conversation. Look at the First World War, for example. Look how many millions died in the First World War for nothing. They could have had that conversation then. I think it's throughout history, you know, throughout history, you could have been sitting there talking about the number of people who lost their lives senselessly under ABCD regime, and on the other hand, scientific achievements or amazing works of art or flourishing of faiths right happening at the same time, which is so crazy. And I see that happening with us. And I think the next generation will have something similar. They will have their amazing flourishing and their amazing blossoming and their amazing growth. And they will have challenges and trials and fitna at the end of the day that they have to come to terms with. Because, hey, Hayat Dunya, right? Hashtag Hayat Dunya. You know, this is the sunnah of this life. So I feel like, on the one hand, when I think about the issues that we face as individuals, as sisters, as brothers, as families, as communities, you know, I get quite passionate about it. But then I'm glad I can get passionate about it, because it means I still got some fight in me. You know, there's still some fire there. There's still some hope there that we can overcome this. The worst for me is when we accept to be victims and we just accept to be at the mercy of fate and like, you know, like just give up. Like there's nothing more to say, nothing more to do, nothing more to fight. Just accept it as it is, shrug your shoulders and say, well, I guess that's the end of that. And I feel like as long as we keep noticing, as long as we keep paying attention, as long as we keep thinking of solutions, making dua, being hopeful, you understand, like, and keeping that vision that we have top of mind and working towards that vision, if Allah takes our life in that state, alhamdulillah.
And I think never falling into a victim mentality.
Yes.
There are plenty of people that, you know, I'm at SOAS at the moment, right? And like, I would say there's quite a heavy kind of leftist influence there, right? You can feel it like in the lectures sometimes, right? And sometimes the way the discourse goes, it kind of encourages me to look at myself as a victim, right? You know, the whole intersectionality thing. And right? So I'm a woman.
Yeah, oh, you're done. You are so done.
Apparently I'm brown, so I'm disadvantaged. So I'm a minority, I'm disadvantaged. But you know, when people are talking at me like that,
I will never accept that.
I'm sitting there thinking, wait a minute, who told you I'm disadvantaged?
I will never accept that.
I never grew up thinking I was disadvantaged.
Yeah.
I grew up next to white people who I considered disadvantaged. Like, I'm not joking, right?
No, I hear you and I know what you're talking about, yes.
And I thought, wow, alhamdulillah, I got parents, I got Islam,
But you see,
I'm rich, I've got everything.
This is the amazing thing, because you didn't see yourself as disadvantaged, because in your head you did not believe the narrative that you're disadvantaged. Guess what? Your reality began to reflect what you believed in your head, which is that you're not at a disadvantage. We are in the same boat. Muslim, widow, divorcee, rare, 5 kids, niqab wearer, whatever the case may be. Someone out there will say to me, you're disadvantaged because of that. You won't get ahead because of that. You're a victim of so and so because of that. And I'm just like, forget you. Forget it.
Wait a minute.
I'll never accept that.
You don't get to tell me that I'm disadvantaged. You created this construct, right, of race. You created this construct of. I don't necessarily see myself as a brown person. That's not my primary identity,
really
right?
Yeah.
And I don't see myself as Indian. That's not my primary identity. I'm a Muslim for me, right? That's my primary thing that I associate myself with. And so sometimes I find it quite funny. It is funny actually that people who think they're doing you a favor.
Yes, I know what you mean. Yeah,
putting you down, but also at the same time, I think it's quite unjust because there are white people out there, right, who are suffering. There are white people who are very disadvantaged.
Yes.
Right? Like I said,
who don't have the language to describe that disadvantage because
and
on paper, they're privileged, right? That's really interesting. Yeah. So does that mean you don't believe in white privilege? I can't believe we went there. But yeah, I'm asking you anyway.
I think
as a concept, do you not believe in it?
I need to look into it more. Before I make any kind of comment on that. But I definitely think a lot of the time what we called white privilege is majority privilege. Yeah. Right?
Dominant culture. I call it dominant culture privilege. Yeah.
There's a dominant culture.
They will be privileged.
Have you seen this sketch? Goodness Gracious Me sketch, right? Where the white guy is the minority and the Indians are like around the table. Yeah. And they're like the daily, what do they call it? I don't know what they called it. It's the Daily Mail, but it's
the Indian version. Yeah.
And they just won't pronounce his name right, His name is Jonathan. And they just won't. They call him like,
Jonathan?
They do everything, Yeah. So they sort of flipped the whole thing, right? But it's quite funny because actually, like, a white person in, in a place where he is the minority. Yeah. I'm not saying he wouldn't, due to colonialism and due to the history, that he wouldn't be treated specially, right? I'm not saying that. But,
he would still be at a disadvantage. He would still be at a disadvantage.
The majority culture that makes, and the majority culture here happens to be white, right?
Yeah, I think he would still be at a disadvantage because he just doesn't have the upper hand. He doesn't know the language. He doesn't understand the culture. He doesn't know his way around. He doesn't know the traditions. He doesn't know the nuances of language and how to read people and, and the cultural cues and all of that. So for sure, he would definitely have to feel at a disadvantage. But I just want to pick up on something that you said about identity. And for me, I am me.
Yeah.
That's my primary identity. I happen to be Muslim and female and, this, that. But the culmination of all of that is that I'm me, uniquely me, and nobody else is me. And no one can take my place. No one can take your place. No one can take any of the readers or listeners or viewers' places, right? And so we choose how we want to show up in the world. If I want to show up as a victim, it's a choice. I can choose to believe what everyone's telling me because most of us can use any of our identities because we're all at intersections now anyway, right? We're all intersectional, every one of us, subhanAllah. Do you hate that word? Really? Why?
Because I feel like it's being forced onto everyone and there's a certain kind of language, especially in the university space.
Okay.
There's a certain kind of language that if you depart from it, you are a kind of seen as a, what's the word? A blasphemer,
Almost. But the thing is, I mean, for me, the intersection, so say, for example, in your case, you're Indian and you're Muslim. So one could say that those two identities are aligned. Okay, that there's not necessarily that much, although of course there's Hindu nationalism and everything, but there are many, many Indian Muslims. Okay, so there's no contradiction there. Once you involve being British in that, which I believe you consider yourself to be, you're at an intersection, because being British means one thing, quote unquote, and being Indian and Muslim might mean something different. So
but that's for every single human being.
I know, but that's what I was saying. We're all at intersections.
Even white people, you know,
well,
are at intersections.
Would you say that, though? Give me an example of that.
Okay, because there are an infinite number of categories you could put people in.
But are they at odds with each other?
Who gets to decide the categories?
I think that it's whether they're at odds with each other or not. That's how I kind of define whether you're at an intersection.
Because if I'm a poor white person,
but those being a white person and being poor are not misaligned. They're not an intersection, because there are poor white people. Do you know what I mean? Like there isn't like a contradiction there between being poor and being white, because
but
there
that's
are poor
assuming
white people.
That there are contradictions then.
Well, for me, for example, I'm black and I'm Muslim. And we've been talking a lot about the intersection between being black and Muslim, okay? Now, for me, the intersectionality is that as a Muslim, I have certain priorities, okay? And I show up in a particular way in the world, and I'm seen a certain way by the world. As a black person, there are other things that come into play, and there are other issues that come into play, and some of those are found within my faith community as well. So we've been talking about racism in the community, etc. So in a way, it's like for my children, they can go, my children are black, their father's Ghanaian, they can go into Muslim spaces and not feel welcome because of the color of their skin. And where we live, that happens a lot. Because if you go into a dominant, Indian masjid, where the imam is speaking Gujarati and everyone else speaks Gujarati, you are not welcome there on the basis of your faith, because you're an outsider on the basis of your race and your culture, right? So, but then equally, if my boys go into a black environment where there's loads of black boys there, they will find that there are certain things that, although they look like everyone else, they don't necessarily fit in there either, because they have a different set of values, they have a different set of, norms and a different belief system. So that is an intersection, because not only are my boys discriminated against or maybe excluded, not necessarily discriminated, but excluded in certain Muslim spaces, but they also show up in the wider world as a black boy. And being a black boy in this society has particular connotations. Certain expectations are made of you. Certain stereotypes people have of you. You're expected to speak a certain way, to have a certain attitude. If you do or you don't, people judge you on that basis. So they are very much intersectional. And not only are they black boys, but they're also African. And they grew up in Egypt. So they're not like black British boys either. Does that make sense? They have so many intersections. I mean, like I said, I do think that...
I guess it depends on if you consider those different aspects to be a disadvantage necessarily.
No.
And if we give that narrative, and I feel like at the moment, that is the narrative.
All right. Okay, I'm operating from a space of diversity and inclusion. And so for me, it's more a case of my intersecting identities are what make me unique and powerful, not what makes me disadvantaged. I don't accept that. That's what I'm saying, is that I will not accept someone saying to me, because you're Muslim, you're disadvantaged, because you're a woman, you're disadvantaged, because you're mixed race, or you're African, or you're a divorcee, or a widow, or whatever, you're disadvantaged. I won't accept that. I consider those intersecting identities as what makes me unique and powerful to do what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala put me on this earth to do.
But then why can't we just say people are individuals? Because that's exactly what that is.
Well,
in the sense
that's true.
In the sense that there are infinite numbers of ways you could divide a person, right? And in the different boxes that you want to put them in. Anyway, I just think that, we need to be careful, especially when we're in spaces where other people do have ideologies. They have political ideologies and other ideologies that they kind of have become the norm, and then we, without even realizing it, kind of adopt it without necessarily. And that's why I'm trying to be careful. Like, I'd like to look into it a bit more before I make a comment. But the aspect of it I've been exposed to doesn't sit well with me.
Doesn't sit well with you, yeah.
Because I feel like it's making me conscious of something that I wasn't really conscious of.
That's so interesting, you see, because in the world you're talking about, being conscious is the point. It's like when you're growing up as a Muslim, for example. I'm sure you had this experience. I'm sure there was a time when you didn't know anything about Gaza, and you didn't know anything about the Palestinian cause, and you didn't know anything about Chechnya and about Bosnia and all of that, right? But at a certain point, people became conscious of these injustices. And then your view of everything kind of changes, because now you're conscious now. You're no longer blind to kind of what's happening on a geopolitical level. You are now aware of it, and you're conscious, and it will color the way that you see things. It changes your paradigm of the world. And I think that is similar to everything. So if at one point in your life you didn't recognize discrimination and you become conscious to it, now your eyes are open. If at one point you didn't recognize racism because you just were unconscious, maybe it was even happening, you weren't aware of it. It's like me. When I walk in the street, I don't pay attention to people. So I don't often see people looking at me or kind of reacting to me in any particular way, because I consciously don't pay attention. And that's because I want to just be able to walk in the world whole and powerful and strong, and not be impacted by what's happening on the outside. Mm-hmm. Someone who can be observing me can see what's actually happening. Oh, those people were pointing, or those people were laughing, or those people gave you a funny look, or whatever. Yeah. But I choose to be unconscious of that, because it allows me to be who I want to be in this world. And maybe what you're talking about is that. It's like, I'd rather be unconscious if being conscious makes me feel like a victim. Does that make sense? Do you think that that's what's happening?
Maybe. I don't think I want to be unconscious of injustice, you know? It's not that. It's just that I am going to push back against somebody putting me into boxes and categorizations because of their ideology and their political kind of agenda, right?
I hear that.
And I'm just supposed to just like accept it because...
Which way do you want me to go?
Because they support BDS, type thing, yeah? So I think as Muslims, we have to be really conscious, that what are we just adopting without questioning it, because it sounds all right, okay, but what is the natural consequence of it? Is it causing more division? Is it making us less united?
Is the end goal to be united, do you think,
as Muslims?
No, as a society.
As a society,
because definitely what you're talking about, the intersections and the white privilege, etc., the end goal is not for unity. The end goal is for justice. Or to address injustice. Well, that's what is, on paper, that's what it is. But do you dispute that? Do you think that might not be what it's all about?
Yeah, I don't think that's what it's really about.
Okay.
I think for us as Muslims, we should really look at the framework that Islam's given us. And if that framework doesn't overemphasize certain things, I think we should strive not to overemphasize those things. And if there's injustice, we need to sort that injustice out. It's not that we don't address injustice, but we don't need to adopt the language and ideology of external people to kind of solve that injustice. And I think we're at peril if we do that, because sometimes we don't see the natural consequence of that, and the fact that somebody's actually trying to fit us into their little world and narrative. So I think caution, I guess,
yes. Caution is always good with most things.
There's something I really wanted to explore with you, and so I'm going to go straight into it, because I don't want this to not be part of the discussion. Jazakallah khairan. So you're a successful writer. You had these wonderful books, mashallah, my kids have benefited from your books so much. Like, I remember the first book I saw of yours was the Swirling Hijab, first children's book, and I didn't even know it was you who authored it. And I was like, oh, this is so amazing. Cute, right? This is just so amazing. Mashallah. I'm going to get, my daughter is going to love hijab, from just reading this book and looking at it from that confident, owning it, perspective. So, so you'd had all of that success, and you had children, you were married, and you were living in Egypt. And I visited you, and I saw, mashallah, you're living in a very comfortable way, alhamdulillah, it seemed to me.
My salon was good too.
And you cooked good food.
It was a good salad.
I'm building it up. And then I heard, I was sitting in London, and I've forgotten exactly how, but I think it was on social media that I saw that suddenly your husband had gone into hospital. And I remember those days, like, we were praying so much. and then eventually he passed away. And I felt like it was a gut punch, you know, like, and that's little old me in England, right? Like feeling like that for you. Talk about that. Tell us, what was it like? What does that mean? And what did it mean?
I think at the time, anybody who was following me on social media remembers that I wrote a lot of poetry. And one of the poems that I wrote was All Changed, I think it was called. And it's really about the axis of your world just tilting, where everything is changed utterly. Obviously, it's something that we didn't expect. You know, there were, no signs that, not really, not at the time anyway. I look back, he hadn't been well for a good few months. But, nobody expected that to happen because we just found him in the morning. He was, semi-conscious, and he had a stroke. And then he went into a coma. And then within 2 weeks, he had passed away. And I suppose I am grateful for those 2 weeks because it allowed me to work through my emotions. And one of the things that I really remember from that time is just an overwhelming sense of gratitude. And some people don't believe me when I say this, or they think that it's weird. But I had a good 15-year run with him, Allah yarhamu. And he was a lovely man, mashallah, and, my kids asked me, if Daddy hadn't died, would you guys still be together? And I'm like, 100%, because we were just like hand and glove, And so the gratitude was for everything that we had, the good, the bad, the highs, the lows, and I knew because of being in a Muslim community it's rare. Yeah, there are people that we know who are happily married, but I knew a lot of people who were not happily married, and who, some people are married for their whole lives and never taste even the 10th of what we had. So I was grateful to Allah for that, because he granted me that for those 15 years. So there was really never a moment where I was like, why me? Why now? This is unfair. It really was, that
Right.
never crossed my mind. It was really like, you know what, Allah, thank you for the 15 years because they were amazing, and if I never have that again, I've had enough. You know what I mean? It's like I've had my cup full, and I'm grateful for that. So that was a huge thing. And then, of course, there were questions about his state, because after the stroke, there was brain damage, and they thought maybe he would he would wake up again. And so there was the whole conversation as to what's going to happen next. He had his business that he was running in Egypt. Then there was the question of, if he did wake up and he was brain damaged, what would that look like? What would that mean? Would we have to leave Egypt? For sure. We'd have to have gone back to the UK. He may never be able to talk. He may not recognize us. He may not be able to walk. Is that what we want for him? How would he feel about that? And all of that, all those thoughts. And then some people, and I'm just being honest with you here, some people and the thing is, I just want to say, for everybody who did make dua for us in that time, I just want to say, may Allah reward you with khair, because there was such a huge outpouring of dua and support and sympathy. It was crazy. And I will never forget that. And even just the kindness of strangers letting me stay in their apartment so I could be close to the hospital to go every day, and just so many amazing experiences, subhanAllah. And what I wanted to say was the outpouring that came from everybody, and this kind of this warmth, this wave of sympathy that came. Some people thought that sending me stories of relatives who had been in a coma for 3 months or a year or 3 years and who had woken up, they thought that was inspiring for me. But actually it was the least inspiring thing possible, because I didn't want him to be in a coma for 6 months. I didn't want him to be in a coma for a year or for 3 years. And for our lives to be on hold for 3 months, 6 months, a year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. Someone sent me a thing and said, oh, I know so-and-so, and they were in a coma for 10 years. And mashallah, after that, they woke up. And I was like, A'udhu billah. I don't want that for him. And I don't want that for us. So Allah, keep him in khair or take him in khair. Because also we had just come back from Umrah as a family. He had taken us all for Umrah. The year before we had done Hajj together, so he had done Hajj twice. And I really felt, if Allah, you want to take him now, this is as good a time as any. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. So it really was a case of, he is not mine. He belongs to Allah. And if Allah chooses to take him back, I respect that, and I accept. And that really was my attitude throughout it all. I accept first that if you wish to take him back, then you have every right to do so, and I will be in gratitude forever for what you gave me while he was here. That's the first thing. And second thing, I know that you've left me here for a reason. I know that if he passes and I'm left here in charge of these children, in charge of this work, in charge of this company, there's a reason for that. And there is a huge wisdom and barakah in it for me. So I never for 1 minute thought, what am I going to do now? What's going to happen with my life? I was like, Allah's got something planned for me. Allah's got greatness planned for us. And I used to tell that to my kids. So Allah is going to keep us. We are going to be okay, and we're going to be better than okay. We are going to do... And I remember when I was in Malaysia for the Ilm Arts Festival, and I read some poetry, and I did like a presentation. It's a huge stadium. And everybody was there. Oh my gosh, subhanAllah. Amir Sulaiman, Peter Gould, Peter Saunders, what's his name, Baba Ali, like all these Muslim artists were there, subhanAllah, and Muslim Bilal, just everybody. Anyway, and I did my presentation, and I said, everybody who's here, who's going through a trial, who's been through something and is almost at the edge, at the brink, know that you're still standing for a reason. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will not forsake you. And so if you've gone through a trial, but you're still holding on, I want you to stand up. And I want you to say, I'm still standing. And they did. And I will never forget that moment. I see Amir Sulaiman because he was tall, so I remember him. And he was like, we're still standing. And it was just this celebration of life. And I feel like at the time, so many sisters reached out to me who had lost their husbands as well. And, we were talking, and, they were talking to me, and I was kind of talking to them. And I noticed a trend. And the trend was, for many women, when their husband passes away, they feel lost because they don't know what they're supposed to be doing now. And there's this sense that life will never be good again. They'll never be happy again. And they're kind of literally just waiting for their time, even if they have kids. I remember many of them who would tell me, like, the only reason I get up in the morning is for my kids. If it wasn't for the fact that I had kids, I would stay in bed all the time. And I just don't understand that. Because myself, as an individual, I know I have worth. And I have work to do in this world, Allah left me here. There must be something that I need to do. There must be some work that is waiting for me, some purpose that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has for me. And I need to be prepared to do it. I need to be ready to show up. And so after the iddah and everything, and you take your time in the iddah to mourn and to cleanse and to heal, I was just ready to start living. And I was just like, Allah didn't leave me here for a foolish purpose. I'm here for a reason. And I don't want to miss out on whatever barakah Allah has got planned for me. Even though I loved my husband dearly, and even though we were together for 15 years and we had 5 kids together, there is still life. And that has been my reality because that's what I expected. And so, alhamdulillah, that's been my reality. So,
would you say that you went through phases? Does grief come in phases? Or because, what you've just described, it sounds like a real, like, the fact that you had that mindset sounds like a real blessing,
I don't ever want to proclaim to be like an expert on grief, because I think everybody grieves differently. I grieved through my poetry. That was how I processed my feelings. And, I write about it in my upcoming book. And actually, it was very difficult for me to write about my husband in my upcoming book, Show Up, because it just feels like such a long time ago. And I felt like I had moved on from those feelings. But in order to be able to write about it, I had to go back there again. I had to go back to the time when I couldn't sleep in our bed, because that's where we had found him. So I was sleeping on the bunk bed, in my boy's room. I remember the time, because some people like to keep everything. I didn't want anything. I just wanted to keep a few clothes. But because I couldn't go into that room, because we had designed that bedroom together and had it made together, so I told my people to sell it. And I remember when the lady came to dismantle it, because that's what they do. They dismantle everything. And I remember that I came to the door and I saw everything broken up to be taken out. And I just broke down. You know, I was just like... yeah, I just broke down, and I had to like move out of the doorway and just go into the other room, because it really is, you know, I remember I wrote a poem about this, and maybe we can share it with, the readers at some point. But, you know, I remember one of the kids broke one of his mugs, and I wrote a poem about it, and I said, you know, one of the kids dropped your mug today. It felt like another piece of you leaving this earth. And so it really is like this process of letting go. And some people don't. Some people prefer to keep everything and preserve that. My coping mechanism was to let go. And to be able to let him go, I had to let those things go. And maybe I did it really just on the spur of the moment. I don't know. Because then afterwards, when I came back to our flat after 2 years, I had been thinking of selling the house. This is the one in Egypt. And by that time, I had remarried and everything. But when I came back to the house, I looked around and I saw we had designed that house together, because it was a flat in Rahab, and we had the plans, and we had got the builders to come in and remodeled the whole place. And I came in and I said, we're never selling this house. This was your dad's house. This was our house that we created together. And inshallah, we're never selling this house, because this should be part of our family for always. I don't need the bed. Couldn't sleep on the bed anyway, because it was too close. When visitors would come, they slept in that room. I couldn't go in there. So I didn't want the bed. I didn't want the wardrobe. We kept some of the clothes for his sons, but most of the stuff I gave to charity. But I said, this house that we created together, this will stay in our family, inshallah, because he put so much of himself into it, you know. And I remember just thinking that, and when I was running his business, which is another story I tell in the book, a lot of people don't know that I had to take over his company, which I didn't even know about. I didn't even know what work they did. And then I had to step in after 6 days as the new CEO, 300 employees. Subhanallah, which was another like stretch, you know. In my iddah I was going, that was a stretch. But again, always going back to that yaqeen. Allah, you wouldn't have put me here if I couldn't handle it. If you were not going to help me get through this, you would not have put me in this situation. So I have to trust that and believe that I've got this.
لا يكلف الله نفسا إلا وسعها.
Thank you. Exactly. Same with my children. And I remember when I decided to leave, to let go of that company, a friend said to me, your husband, Allah yarham's biggest legacy is his children. So if the business is hampering your ability to be there for his children, then we have to let the business go and focus on the children, because that's his legacy. That's the piece of him that will live on, just like all of us. The piece of us that will live on once we return to Allah is whatever we've implanted in our kids, right? And that continues through their bloodline, inshallah. So it was, one of those like pivotal moments, I guess, in my life. And I'm just grateful to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because the mindset wasn't something that I actively cultivated. Allah just put it there. I just instinctively had that response to be grateful for what was, to know that better is coming, to know that there's a wisdom behind all of this, there's a purpose behind all of this, and to live that reality and not accept any other interpretations. You know what I'm saying? Because we can interpret everything in a good way or a bad way, in a negative way or a positive way, in a way that is empowering or disempowering, absolutely everything. So I chose, alhamdulillah, by Allah's grace, to interpret everything in a way that empowered me, to continue to have faith, to have hope, to trust in Allah and His plan for me as an individual. So I'm grateful to Allah for that.
Oh, subhanAllah, Naima, I'm sure you've made, the viewers and listeners weep as well, just like you've brought tears to our eyes. And I think a part of that is, I think there's something in us human beings, when we see another human being tried with something, that we can't imagine ourselves being tried with, and then seeing them come out, you know, and with that kind of mindset, I think it's just so inspiring, and it's so. I think all of us hope that were we ever to face a struggle, or you know, in life, and struggles in life are inevitable, you know. You live long enough, you know, something's going to come along, right?
You are going to lose someone, somewhere, sometime, for sure. That is an inevitability, isn't it?
But
unless
you know,
we die too young to do that.
You know, you mentioned that certain things were not helpful, right, to you. I'm just thinking from the perspective of, like, somebody who was listening and observing, you know, you go through this experience. It can be really hard, can't it, for people around you, close around you, but also further afield, to know, like, because I felt quite paralyzed. I felt like I wanted to pick up the phone, and I thought, well, I'm just going to be taking away from her kids.
Yeah.
Or, you know, I might be inconveniencing her. She'll feel obliged to answer, and who am I anyway? You know, I had those kind of thoughts in my head, like, who am I? I don't even live near her. You know, there's probably people around her that are. But then I thought, well, maybe what if there aren't? What if I'm not doing my duty? You know, there are these, and even those people who sent you those stories.
They were trying to help, I get it. But I had people who travelled to come and see me.
Subhanallah.
And I'll never forget, Allah, they know who they are. And I ask Allah to reward them, and I hope that I would be able to do the same for them, because, you know, one sister rang me, a beautiful friend, and she rang, she said, I'm coming. You know, when is good? And I was like, no, you don't have to come. Come on, you don't have to come. My aunt came, you know, a friend and her daughters and her mum came, because they're very close family friends. And I had, you know, like another 1, 2, 3 during my iddah who just came just to be with me. And I think, just so that this is something helpful to the listeners and the viewers, when it comes to somebody who's in mourning, the most important thing is to be really sensitive and listen. And ask them what they need. Don't assume that you know. Ask them how you can help, how you can be there for them. Sometimes it will just be practical things, you know, like picking up the kids from school, you know, like dropping off food. Like if they have like young children, just like looking after the kids so that they can take a break, you know, just to go and sleep sometimes, you know. Everyone's got, like, you know, different dynamics at home. Sometimes family all come, and it's the last thing you want, because sometimes people all come and they want to keep talking to you about it, and all you want is silence, you know.
Right.
You just want to be left alone. So really it is about respecting their parameters and really inviting them to be open about what they really need. Do you need company, or do you need space? Do you need us to be around and cheerful, or do you want us just to be here just to hold you? Do you know what I mean? And I had like a variety of, alhamdulillah, I just, like I said, the outpouring was just, subhanallah, something I've never experienced before. Like, our fridge was ram, okay? Like, people sent so much food. And I actually wrote a short story about this from the perspective of a child whose father has passed away. And interestingly enough, the child is actually resentful of all the people in the house and all the food they keep bringing, because the child, A, wants their dad back, B, they want their mum to themselves, and C, they want their mum's cooking again. SubhanAllah. So really it is about just, you know, not assuming that you know what they need, but just letting them know, just let me know what you need and how I can help and how I can support you, and making a safe space for them to say what it is that they need, and then always dua. And when you're thinking about that person, just let them know, I'm thinking about you, you know, if you need anything, let me know, you know.
That means a lot as well.
It means so much. It does mean so much, because I think for widows, you know, being widowed and in iddah is different from being divorced and in iddah, because when you're a widow, you are mourning, you know, and you've got so much to process and so much to go through, and also some things related to the relationship itself. So if you had a fantastic relationship and he passed away, your iddah is going to look one way. But what if you had a problematic relationship, or you guys weren't even getting along, and now he's died and you're in this iddah, you know? And I remember a friend of mine whose husband passed away quite soon after. She was in that situation. So again, everyone's iddah is different. And so for the people around them, it really is a matter of just letting them know that we're here to support you in whichever way you need us. Yeah.
SubhanAllah. Yeah, so I think really what you're saying is listen.
Yeah.
Give that person the space to be able to tell you what they need.
Yeah.
Rather than assuming.
Yeah. And for anybody in that situation, you know, don't assume people know what you need. You know, you also need to be vocal and kind of set your boundaries or destroy the boundaries, whatever it is that you need at that time, and be prepared to be open with people so that you can get the help that you need. Because as women, sometimes, you know, we've got a tendency to kind of just say, oh, I'll handle it, you know.
So was it very soon after? I'm imagining like a lot of people, a lot of noise, a lot of, you know, like movement going on in your house, and then at some point they must have all left.
Yeah.
And then it was just you and the kids.
Well, by that time I was working. So I was going into the office.
You had to
so
get on
it was
with
a bit different. And this is the thing, that you have to get on with life. But I think for many widows, there is the loneliness and the missing the person. But then there's also the new responsibilities that you potentially have that you didn't have before. So if you weren't the breadwinner, you have to deal with that now. In my case, I was a complete kept woman. So a proper, what's they called? Surrendered wife. So I didn't know anything about tax. I didn't know anything about the bank accounts. I didn't know even what the business did. Okay, and had to learn all that really quickly. And again, I wrote another poem about this. Might do a giveaway for your readers, actually, that particular book of poetry. But just about all the paperwork and all the red tape. Things that you don't think about.
So much what the other half's doing.
Yeah. It's really stuff that you do not think about until you're in a situation where you have to start signing things. You have to start getting lawyers. If there was no will, and that's another thing as well that could benefit people, inshallah, who are listening to this. The Prophet ﷺ warned us about sleeping 3 days without a will. This is serious, people. Because if you die and you have assets and you have no will, you are causing a big mushkila for your wife and your children and whoever else your executor is going to be, you know, whoever that person's going to be. It causes a huge problem, especially if you have assets dotted here and there. Your wife potentially doesn't even know about those assets, exactly. You know, so you need to have documented all of that. Assign an executor to your will. And make sure that you've provided for your own funeral and stuff like that. Because I remember a sister messaged me and she said, we want to do a collection for you. And I was like, huh? Collection for what? She said, oh, you know, just to help you and the kids and you know, to bury your husband or whatever. And I'm so proud to say, and I know that he would have felt good about this, Allah yarhamu. And I said to her, we are not in need of the charity of the people, alhamdulillah. My husband left us well provided for. And that was one thing that was a point for him, because we used to see other people doing collections. And he always was like, why didn't you make provisions, man? Like, how are you going to die and not even have enough money to get yourself buried, let alone now what's going to happen? You know, there's no savings. There's no business to pass on. Like, you haven't put anything for the future. And now your wife's going to have to deal with that. And then this is the whole widows at the mercy of the community, or now they become the responsibility of the community. So those people who have the means, I'm not saying everyone does, but people who have assets and they have the means, do be thinking of the future and do be planning for the future so that inshallah you can start investing now in an easier transition for your family when you're older, because not when you pass away, because leaving your family with no will or so with no money, firstly, is a problem, but also leaving your family with no will and there are assets, it becomes an actual court situation. And you have to actually apply to the court to be given the probate, a right of probate, and that can take a long time. And especially if the assets are unknown, it can take a long time to gather all the information that's required. In the meantime, if you've got no money there, how is your wife and kid? How are they surviving? You know,
the thing is, it's such a difficult subject to bring up. With young people, do you know what I mean? Like,
I'm not talking about young people. I'm talking about people our age. I'm talking about people in their 40s. You know, are we young people?
Young, as in not the age that people imagine.
Oh
that
no,
this
is very short-sighted.
I know.
This is very short-sighted. From as soon as a Muslim, you should know that you need.
Death is not a taboo for us.
As a Muslim, you should know that if you've got anything, you need to have a will. Right? No 3 days that you sleep without a will. That's the first thing. And secondly, I think as soon as you've got a stable income, you should be saving. Now we're talking about money issues, but like as soon as you have a stable income, even if it's just £50 a month, just a standing order, just to put it into a separate place, just for a rainy day, just for the future, you know, it's yani wajib yani.
Definitely, and especially the more complicated your finances get, you know, the more of a mess you're leaving.
Exactly.
Everybody else to have to deal with.
And it's just the emotional toll of it, because in Egypt it's different, obviously. Oh, you can imagine how different it is in Egypt. I don't know how many different offices we went to.
Did they have computers yet in the offices?
No, everything was handwritten. Handwritten from one office to the other, to get the signature here, go over there to get a signature, get this, get that, get this proof, get this translated. This, I mean, of course, in Egypt it was...
one place to
exactly.
SubhanAllah.
Alhamdulillah ala kulli hal.
You're just giving me flashbacks of Egypt and...
Those are the worst type of flashbacks. Administration in Egypt, those are the worst type of flashbacks. That's actually what made me hate the country, actually, to be honest.
Me too.
Yeah.
Alhamdulillah.
Really?
I love Egypt.
Yeah.
I have a love-hate relationship with Egypt.
Like everyone, yani.
Yeah.
We're all in the same boat.
But I think the admin was probably...
That's the hate side.
One of the times when you just wanted to cry.
Yeah. It's just so bad. It's peak, as they say.
I had a sister who wanted to become Muslim. Mm-hmm. They said, you need a passport photograph. She came to the masjid, right? And like Al-Azhar, and she wanted to become Muslim. And she just wanted to do it. You know, some people, they don't want to just do it with a little gathering at home. They want to do it. They want to have the certificate. They want to feel...
proper.
So we went there and they're like, you need a passport photograph. You need stamps. You need this. You need that. And it was like, I was like, SubhanAllah, the woman has come to you. She wants to be a Muslim. Get her, man. You know, get her through the door.
Sort it out.
And so it was another delay of a few hours, right?
Yeah.
Of us going from one... And I was so embarrassed, you know, like that she had to go through all of that. But it was like, this is Egypt, you know.
It is Egypt. It is.
But Jazakallah khairan for sharing all of that with us.
I think it's the first time I've spoken about it publicly, actually. And it was actually very difficult for me to write about it in the book. But I knew that I needed to, because the title of the book is Show Up. And it's like a motivational manifesto for Muslim women. And that...
This is your new book?
This is the new book coming out next year, inshallah. But that attitude was a direct result of losing Suleiman Allah yarhamu. Directly. I didn't have that attitude before.
The attitude of showing up?
Showing up, yeah.
Right.
And what that means, showing up, is being present authentically in your life and making a decision to show up in all of your roles, you know? To be mindful, to be present, to be intentional with everything that you do. Mm-hmm. And to understand that you're here for a reason, you know, and it's no accident that you had 3 little kids under 5. It's no accident that your husband took a second wife. It's no accident that business failed. It's no accident that you lost your parents. All of this was preparing you for something greater. Mm-hmm. And all of that, if you choose, can make you an even more powerful force in your life. But it's really how you know, the story you tell yourself, you know, the beliefs that you choose to adopt. It's a lot of mindset stuff. But really, that showing up and making a decision to say, I'm here and I'm here for a reason. And I'm going to make sure that I maximize the benefit from this life before it's taken away from me. That came as a direct result of losing my husband. I didn't have that attitude before.
SubhanAllah, I remember the dedication from my sister's lips was to him, right?
Yes, it was.
I read stuff like that.
Yes,
I really
it's important. That's what tells you,
important.
Like a little piece of the writer and their life, slice of life. I like the dedication.
The wind beneath your wings, you'd said.
And he was, mashallah.
Inshallah, may Allah unite you in Jannah.
Ameen.
So, Naima, you're on a mission to get everyone to write. I've noticed that you've really, you inspired me to, write, and alhamdulillah, published a book, mashallah, and that was great. And
First of many, inshallah.
But now you're widening the net, I've noticed, and you're really putting the message out there, and you're building, you have courses, you're offering your mentorship to people. Why should people write?
I think that I believe, and I'll just tell you a story about when I went to a TED Talk a few months ago.
Ooh.
And
why didn't you invite me?
It was in Bradford.
Okay.
There's TEDx talks everywhere, so you don't have to come all the way to Bradford for one. But there was one TEDx Bradford, and I was sitting with 2 ladies on either side of me, and we ended up kind of chatting and just sharing what brought us here. And while I was listening to them, I looked around the auditorium and I said, you know what? I reckon every single person in this room could do a TED Talk if they had the right training. I think everyone's got something worthy of a TEDx stage, right, to share. And I believe that about stories as well. I believe every one of us has a story to tell. And because we are unique beings, when we write from a place of authenticity and vulnerability, we are able to bring something to the world that nobody else can bring, that can't be replicated. It's like if you write an essay on childbirth and I write an essay on childbirth, even if we both had natural births and we both gave birth to boys, for example, and our husbands were there, you're going to write something completely different from me, and I'm going to write something completely different from you, mainly because of you are different, you are unique, and you have your own unique perspective, experience, understanding, way of expressing yourself and everything. So I believe, firstly, that every one of us has a story to tell, a story that has value, and a story that needs to be heard by someone else out there. Mm-hmm. That will resonate with someone out there, that there are a tribe of people who are waiting for your perspective, waiting for your guidance, waiting for your experience, to learn from you, to be supported by you, etc. So I believe that very, very strongly. Whether that writing takes the guise of articles or blogs or, sort of anthology writing, essay writing, or full-blown books, fiction or non-fiction, for me, is not really material. It's more a case of people understanding the value of their own stories, and then being shown the way to actually write those stories and be able to share them with the world for the benefit of the world. And since last year, we've been working on the Muslimah Writers Project, which is basically our contribution to nurturing the next generation of Muslimah writers, and especially Muslim sisters who don't necessarily feel confident enough to access the current writers community wherever they are. Mainly, we find that a lot of our students and clients in the Muslimah Writers Project are pretty much practicing sisters, or maybe a bit more conservative sisters, or sisters who are looking for a Muslim space in which to explore their writing. So we offer them that. And we've had some amazing times. We've had courses for children's writing, for sort of general writing, for fiction, and we had a summit where you were in the summit, weren't you? Yeah, you took part in the summit, and we had just amazing writers from all different walks of life sharing their expertise in what I hope is kind of my modus operandi, which is a spirit of togetherness and the idea that we are stronger together. Mm-hmm. And that is huge for me, because I don't believe anyone is my competition, just like I don't believe anyone is your competition. I believe that if you and I work together, it benefits us and it benefits our people as well. So anytime I work on a project, I'm always trying to draw people in and pull people in, because it elevates everyone, right? So we did that, and now we've been moving into the writing coaching space, the book coaching space, and now we work with women from all walks of life, Muslim and non-Muslim, who have a message to share and want to write a non-fiction book, and now we're starting to publish as well. So it's very exciting, and we love it. Alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. Yeah, writing helps you to think.
Yeah.
It helps you develop your ideas and what you stand for, and what... Yeah. And I love the idea of owning your story.
And I think, just picking up on what you said about that earlier, we are still in a space where we need to hear more diverse voices. And the publishing industry knows that. And they've been acknowledging that for the last few years now. So the more Muslims are telling their genuine stories, the more we can contribute to the narrative, because unfortunately there still is a lot of the narrative that is not organic. It's not coming from us. It's other people making films, or other people writing books, or other people writing plays about Muslims that unfortunately can kind of feed into stereotypes, or just focus on things that are not really what we are worried about, and don't address our own concerns.
Or have some agenda,
exactly.
Even if they're Muslims sometimes.
That can happen too, exactly, and it does happen. Mm-hmm. So, the more Muslims write, and I really want to encourage more Muslim men to write, because there is a huge gap for Muslim boys fiction, because we have now, Muslim children's books, there's quite a few now. Mm-hmm. Middle grade, which is like early chapter books, and then sort of novels for teenagers. The majority are with female protagonists and written by Muslim women. And there are very few Muslim male voices out there. And I really feel, this is something that, I feel quite strongly about, because I think that in our society, not in our community, but in the wider society, I really feel like Muslim men are extremely marginalized. And their voices are almost not welcome, because they're seen to be the privileged ones in our community, which they kind of are, to be fair. But within the wider society, they're not, because they are, at risk of so many things: the anti-terror laws, stop and search, racism, class issues, the whole demonization thing. And if you look in our media, you'll see that there's kind of two tropes. There is the conservative / Islamic oppressive male patriarch, and then the oppressed woman who's dying to be liberated from hijab, right? So these are kind of like the two tropes that we have. And it's up to the brothers really to start addressing some of those through fiction and non-fiction, and really just let their voices be heard more, and really start owning their story, because I feel brothers also need a safe space where they, like we had with sisters, where we centered ourselves and we were able to then be honest about whatever issues we were facing. I think brothers need a space like that too, where they don't have to perform. Because I feel like in our community, there's a lot of performance. Right. So you have an appearance of, say, piety, for example. And if you have a beard and you wear a certain type of clothing, it's assumed you're a particular way. And you have to live up to that. So you can't admit to depression or drug use or anger issues or, loveless marriage or anything like that, because you have to keep your image up, because that's kind of how you're seen in the community and in society. And I think Muslim men need those safe spaces for their mental health, to be honest.
Definitely.
We have them, alhamdulillah, we have them a lot more, don't you think? Don't you think we as women have a lot more freedom? We've made them, right?
When we don't have them, we sort of like just get together and make
and we have been over the past 10 years, maybe more than that. We've been creating more and more spaces for Muslim women to be able to be themselves and deal with whatever they need to deal with. But I don't think I've seen the same happening with brothers. And the thing is, why I say that is because we know that suicides and depression amongst men is way higher than it is amongst women, and Muslim men are not exempt from that, especially the younger ones. So that's my thought for the day.
And how would that look? What do you think that would look like in terms of brothers creating that space?
Support groups, counselling, therapy. A safe space is a space where we can come and we can speak without judgment. And we know that the people there all respect that safe space. Writing, having a publication that could work. Podcasts are another great way as well, where that particular podcast is going to be addressing these things. I think I've seen a few. There have been a few that are coming up. And
where you mean it doesn't have to only be about dawah or politics.
Yes. Reality.
Activism.
It needs to be about the stuff that is really going on in people's homes on a day-to-day basis. I think Stephen Covey talks about the sphere of influence and the sphere of concern. And I feel like a lot of people feel very comfortable in the sphere of concern. That's politics, social issues, Islamophobia even, racism and all of that, right? And this is my own personal view, because I believe in it, that Allah has given us free will. And I believe that Allah giving us free will has empowered us to choose. It's not even my belief, it's a fact, okay? We have the ability to choose, right? We can choose to focus here or focus there. I can choose to see this as a good thing or a bad thing. It's a choice. Nothing is set in stone for me. So I feel like when people choose to focus on the circle of concern, which is the stuff that they cannot impact, it automatically diverts their focus from the things they actually can change, which is the circle of influence. Right. That's typically the day-to-day stuff. That's typically things within yourself, within your family.
It's not glamorous.
It's not glamorous at all, and it can be really hard work sometimes, and it requires a lot of honesty and humility. But our communities will not change unless we start to pay attention to our sphere of influence that we have. The more we're in the sphere of concern, we don't have any energy for the sphere of influence anymore. Because I'm so busy watching, dawah debates, from Regent's Park and Panorama and, this debate and that big situation and reading the news and watching Al Jazeera.
Going to protests, you can get into this false sense of I'm
doing something,
right?
yes.
When your family's falling apart,
Thank
or
you.
your inner spirituality is falling
Exactly.
apart.
I agree with you 100%.
The reason why that's a false economy, or a kind of a false way of looking at your usefulness and your activity, is that if you don't work on the internal, you don't hold the fort. You don't sort your basics, your home out, right? And your family and the sphere of influence out, then sooner or later it will fall apart, and then everything else that you're concerned about will also be affected.
And the thing is that it's a complete waste of energy for most of us, because we're not journalists. Most of us are not journalists. Most of us are not politicians. Most of us do not have 10,000, 50,000, 100,000 people who are paying attention to what we say. Some of us do, but most of us don't, right? So for you to invest your energy in liking and retweeting and, watching stuff and commenting and having YouTube comment battles and all of this kind of thing, it dissipates your energy for the stuff that is really important. So you don't have any energy anymore, because also like getting involved with fights in Twitter and having Twitter wars and stuff like that. It's very glamorous, like you said. It's very exciting. It gets the testosterone going. It's got your dopamine hit. Exactly.
Yeah.
So you feel, like you said, like you're doing something worthwhile. You're fighting for the deen, you're fighting for the dawah and all of this kind of thing. But the reality is you're not doing anything.
And you see the dishes.
Right.
And the laundry.
Exactly. And really, how much have you changed? How much have you really accomplished? How much impact can you really have on these global geopolitical issues? If you're like most people, very little. Because it's just you, like a keyboard warrior.
Is to fix yourself up.
Thank you.
And your family.
Yeah.
Because we sometimes underestimate that we are just like a node in a network.
Yeah.
Our children, subhanallah, I remember once saying to my dad, what's my legacy going to be? This is years ago when I just had a baby and I was like feeling like, so overwhelmed. And he said, what do you think that is? He pointed to my children,
Totally.
And I was like, subhanallah, sometimes it's right in front of us, we're building human beings.
Yeah.
And our families and our local communities.
And may I just jump in there and say that this applies equally to the men and the women.
Absolutely.
Of course, the women have the primary responsibility, but as a man, say I'm in a man's shoes, those are my children. That's my lineage. That's my family. And those are my kids that are going out into the world. So as a man who is responsible and has a sense of, kind of leadership and vision for my family, I'm not going to leave it all to my wife. And I'm off swanning off at protests and all that kind of thing. Like, I need to invest in these children too. And I need to invest in my relationship with them so that they can actually learn from me and listen to me and open up to me and share with me. And I think a lot of fathers maybe miss out that part, or are maybe unaware of the fact that, maybe you married a good woman, okay, because you wanted her to raise righteous children. But you have a role to play, and a crucial role to play. We know the importance of the male role model for the male child, but also for the female child. Yeah. You are going to be the model of the man that your daughter's going to want to marry eventually. Your son, if he respects you and admires you, he's going to want to be like you. But if you're never there, if you don't have time for them, if you're one of those dads who is out working, and then when you come home, you're in front of the TV, or you're playing your games, or you're on your phone the whole time, which we know is a real thing, how much impact can you really have on them?
Yeah, I think it's about all of us, as parents and as members of this society and community, becoming more conscious and investing our time in sometimes the mundane things, the difficult things, the unglamorous things, but the things that really matter and will build our communities. Jazakallah khairan, Naima. You have a free gift you want to offer our listeners and viewers.
Yes, I do, because I'm very, very excited about the Show Up book coming next year, inshallah. So I have a little free introductory version, if you like, a free ebook. It's called Be the Hero, and it's available for free download, and it's on bit.ly/me Be the Hero ebook. And I think we'll probably have the link, where it's suitable. But also anybody who follows me on social media can find that link there, because I share it everywhere. And it really is my love letter to my sisters. It's about the 6 steps to finding your inner awesome. And I've had, some wonderful feedback about it. I really wrote it from the heart. So it would be fantastic if everybody who listens to it just goes to the link and gets their own copy and shares it.
Inshallah, Jazakallah khairan. We'll be sure to put that in the comments, in the description. So, Jazakallah khairan, Naima. I'm going to give you a hug after this.
It's always good to talk to you, mashallah.
Oh, alhamdulillah. I'm glad we got this opportunity.
Alhamdulillah.
We never really talked about it fully. I think, a lot of the things that we mentioned today. Brothers and sisters, I'm going to wrap up now. So, Jazakumullah khairan for listening, and do share this episode with somebody who it might benefit. I'm sure there's people out there that need to hear this, need to hear the empowering and positive messages that Sister Naima gave us today. I'm certainly inspired, and I'm sure you are too. Inshallah, with that, I will bid you farewell. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.